everybody, and welcome back to the Weird Science Wacky Silver Age Comics podcast, where I'm going to be going through an issue of Superboy, Superboy number 75 from September of 1959, and in particular, a story where we're going to find out that Superboy is bad to the bone. Because this is The Punishment of Superboy, written by Otto Binder, pencils and inks by John Cicala, and it is an issue where Jonathan Kent is desperately trying to figure out a way that he can put the obedience back in the Superboy. It starts off with a half page of kind of super dickery. It's not really the super dickery we're used to because it is something that happens in the issue, but it's almost like the idea of here's the shocking thing that's going to set this up. And you end up at saying, can you believe that Clark Kent, who was secretly Superboy, was ever disobedient to his foster parents, Mom and Dad Kent? Well, this amazing event did occur years ago when the Boy of Steel was a brat of steel for a while, and it became a super problem for Dad Kent to figure out, quote, the punishment of Superboy. And with this, it's in a panel that shows that Superboy's down in the basement. He's working on a Superboy robot that he does then. And Jonathan says, hey, you haven't been obedient. You've been disobeying me. I'm going to turn out the light. And now you have to go to bed early. And Superboy says, but I can see in the dark with my X-ray vision, Dad. You'll have to find some other way to punish me, if you can. And so this is that idea of, kids acting up and how do you punish them? And usually it ends up being, more of a lesson to all of this. It really becomes a contest between Clark and Jonathan. It also ends up making Clark look like a real piece of crap who really likes messing with Jonathan with all of this and shows the idea, because really the idea of punishment for the most part is, you kind of go with it because you love your mom and dad. You might be mad at them, but you do respect them. You respect your elders, all of that stuff. It's not just the idea of how can I physically harm this kid for make them listen. And that's what it ends up. But even then, Jonathan is at wit's end. He goes through all of the tried and true methods of punishing your kids. I mean, he beats them. He ends up hitting them with a stick. He starves them. He then tries to handcuff them to the stairway, and all sorts of other things, all the tried and true methods, but they're not going to work. Then he just mentally abuses them, and that ends up working in the end, thankfully. But you end up where all of this is set up because the Smallville father and son banquet's going on. And they have awarded the Father of the Year to Jonathan Kent. Now, is it because he's nice? No. Is it because he tells Clark bedtime stories? Nope. Helps him with his homework? Nope. Why you get this? Smallville is big on obedience, I'll tell you, because you end up winning the Father of the Year just because you train Clark to be an obedient son. That's it. You basically are getting an award because you have made sure that your son listens to you no matter what. Well, we end up going out of that banquet, and Clark says, oh, man, Dad, remember back in the day when I wasn't so obedient? Remember that time? And you end up having Jonathan, oh, man, years ago, your mother and I feared you would grow up to be a bad boy. And so we go back to that. You end up having their thoughts fly back to when Superboy wasn't so super. And you end up starting out with Superboy just flies into the house. And this isn't necessarily the farm era of all this. It's just a house in Smallville. They have a picket fence and all that. Well, Superboy flies in and Jonathan says, oh, good. You have to do your chores. Go get your Clark Kent clothes on and come back because you need to chop some wood. Well, he does go get changed, but then when he comes out, he ends up saying, well, Dad, why do I have to do this as, Clark? Why can't I do this as Superboy? It would be a lot easier. I could get it done in a second. You know that. Well, you end up having Jonathan, instead of what you're expecting, you really are expecting, especially nowadays, to hear the idea of, well, some of these chores are meant for you to, kind of fit in and learn what it is to be human and get on page with what it is here on Earth. But he doesn't go with that. He basically says, because I told you, that's it. And then you even have him say, well, people could see you as Superboy cutting wood. And then, the jig is up and gone then. And you end up where Clark's like, well, I could do it at night. No. You're going to do what I say, and you're going to do it now, buddy boy. But with that, he's so concerned about the identity revealed there, but yet starts yelling at Clark and calling him Superboy loud enough for Martha to come out of the house and go, whoa, what's going on, boys? And then she realizes and says, oh, you got to be easy on him. Growing boys act stubborn at times. He'll grow out of it. Well, then Jonathan, who's now furious, says, no, he might grow up to be a bad boy. And if he doesn't learn respect, parental authority, for the last time, Clark, you'll chop that wood. And that's all it is. This is nothing about anything. You're disobeying me. You're talking back. Chop that wood. Clark, he ends up going here. It's like the whole deal with the Christmas Story. He skips a bunch of double dog phases here. He skips a lot where he goes right to the trash talk. You're not my real father. I'm only your adopted son. And throws down the axe. And you end up where Martha then starts crying and says, oh, well, maybe you want to go back to the orphanage where we got you as a baby. And that's the cool thing about this continuity here, because that's the story. What is she going to say if it's the, well, get back in your rocket and go? That'd be great. Get back in your rocket and go back to, oh, I forgot you don't have a planet. Too soon, Martha. See, that would have been good. Then I would have played that sound effect for her. But she says, no, we'll just take you back to the orphanage. And he freaks out. Clark realizes, maybe he realizes he's gone too far. Oh, no. Not that, Mom. I love you and Dad dearly and always want to live with you. Okay. So they got something here, right? Which, they're kind of going to go back to, but they should have just stuck with it. But instead, you end up having Clark pleading, no, I love you. I love living here. I love you. Never says Dad, just Mom, but then says, yeah, but I'm not chopping wood like an ordinary boy. It's a waste of my time. And so you end up having Jonathan say, well, you know what's going to be a waste of time? Is me and you right now into the woodshed. You're getting a beating. And they go in and you end up having the classic line. This is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you, Clark. Well, Clark says, you're right, because I'm not going to feel a thing. I'm Superboy. And so then Jonathan gets pissed and grabs a log of wood and cracks it over Clark's butt, and it breaks. And then he says, you can't give me a spanking. I'm the boy of steel. And so you end up having Jonathan he's already flustered. Now it is now a contest. Now it's Jonathan now has to prove he's the man of the house. He's got to figure out something. Well, later that night, you end up having him go into Clark's room. Oh, Clark, you in here? What are you doing there, boy? And Clark's like, I'm looking at my Superboy scrapbook that I keep. And so you end up, Jonathan, say, oh, well, you still disobeyed me. So you know what? You're going to stay in your room and you're not going to get supper. And then you end up, right as the pages turn for the scrapbook, you end up having Clark saying, I can go without food indefinitely, Dad. Remember this exhibit I once put on to help a scrap drive? I went without real food for a week. Right in his face. And in the picture, there is a picture of Superboy at the scrap drive, and he's eating out of these jars that are labeled broken glass, junk, and tar. So he is eating something, right? And I would be like, okay, here's your dinner, broken glass. Smash his head into the window. There, eat that broken glass, jerk. But you end up where he's like, okay, well, I forgot about that. So you have John, he's already defeated. And he's like, I forgot about that, but I see that radio over there and you are wearing it's World Series time, is it? Well, I'm going to take that radio. You won't be listening to that World Series after all. Well, Clark's like, oh, that? Well, I'm just going to use my super hearing and listen to the announcer's voice directly. And then ends up throwing in his face even more. Oh, by the way. And he puts his hand up. I'd love to think that it's the Hulk Hogan. And he goes, oh, by the way, it's 3-3 right now. And they're taking out the pitcher. Jerk. And then he's like, oh, drat. And Jonathan goes, I don't need to know the box score. Stop it. I guess taking your radio is useless. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, wait a minute. Me and your mom and you are going to go to the movies tonight to watch that sci-fi movie. Well, guess what? You ain't going. And they leave him. They leave to go to the movie. Well, you end up, Clark's like, that poor dad, he's so rattled. He keeps forgetting my various superpowers. I'll just use my telescopic vision to watch the science fiction movie. And he's watching it at that point. Okay. So when mom and dad return from the movie, they're like, oh man, too bad you missed it, Clark. It was such a great movie. It was really up your alley. And you end up having Clark with finger banging guns in hand here say, gosh, Dad, wasn't it exciting when that scientist finally froze the space blast with the amazing Zero gun? Zap, zap. And you end up having Jonathan, oh, shit, I forgot about the telescopic vision. Oh, God, what are we going to do? And then, just because he's got his big cock energy, Clark just leaves the room. He's like, oh, well, I'm heading out. Where are you going? I'd love it. Where are you going? None of your business. But he leaves the room, and Martha says, I guess we can't punish him. I mean, that's it. He's got superpowers. He could do what he wants. I mean, he now... pretty much, we're probably going to get kicked out of our big room. We'll be in his like he can do anything here, and you end up having Jonathan say, "No, Martha. Like other growing boys, it's important for Superboy, his young mind to be molded the right way, or he might turn into a super bad boy." And he's got to figure it out. And he's like, "I am going to figure out a punishment that works." And what he does is he remembers that the next day is the championship marble match. You know, the big thing going on in Smart. How could he forget? And with that, you have Superboy is supposed to be the big umpire for it. So, you know, Clark, he's getting in his Superboy costume. He's going to go out. And Jonathan comes in. Now, he's already tried various things, including, like you said, hitting him with a log. It didn't work because he's got superpowers. Now, Jonathan keeps forgetting superpowers, but this thing that he does here, it seems like he's completely lost his mind. He's doing something here that's not even going to stop anybody because he comes in and locks his window in his room. Now, again, Superboy and Clark has proven that he's not just going to listen to Jonathan. He's not going to be a good boy. A good boy doesn't listen to his father because he's, he does it because in the meantime, he respects him and loves him. And that is not going on here with Superboy. So locking the window, what is that going to do? He says, you know what? I'm making you stay in your room and I'm locking this window so you can't leave. Now, put some kryptonite on that bitch and then you got something going. But he ends up leaving. Superboy's like, oh, man, I'm supposed to be the umpire of this marble shoot tournament. But I'm going to get him. I'm going to show my dad that I can do it. All he has to do is unlock the window and fly out. No, instead, he's really going to show Jonathan. He bores a hole into the floor of his room to then bore all the way off across town to go and umpire the match. He does say that he'll repair it later. But hey, so what happens? Because, I mean, you have a marble tournament in Smallville. I mean, who isn't going to be there? Everybody's there. So you end up where you have Pa Kent go downtown to watch it. And then all of a sudden, oh no, there's Superboy. How did he get here? He's right next to a big giant hole and goes, oh man, he must have dug his way over here. How am I going to do this? And he says, outwitted again. Again, this is less about punishment now than just who is going to win out. Now with that, Superboy doesn't see his dad there, but he is having fun at the marbles tournament. In between matches, he's having kids throw marbles in the air. And then he's throwing his shooter at it to knock them down. Everybody seems to think this is just the cat's meow. Well, you end up the next day, and I love too, it doesn't even seem like Jonathan even mentioned this to Clark. You know, if he mentions it, it's just going to bring up that he failed again. But the next day, Clark, who again is oblivious that anybody's angry at him, comes in and says, hey, Mom, and it's always to Mom. I'm telling you, this is all about Jonathan and him. But he's like, hey, Mom, I'm going to use my allowance this week. I'm going to buy a model airplane. And Jonathan, rightly so. What do you mean allowance? You didn't even do it. You've been disobeying me. You don't get your allowance. And you're thinking, okay, well, this is how he'll get him. I mean, what, is Superboy going to go rob a bank? I mean, is he that bad to the bone? I don't know. But he ends up, yeah, you're not going to get your allowance until you obey, until you learn obedience. So you end up having Clark, probably learn his. No, he doesn't. What he does is get dressed up as Superboy, gets a glass tank, goes into the ocean and catches the finned unicorn fish that he's now going to sell at the aquarium so that he can get some money, gets exactly the amount of his allowance, and then goes to buy the model. Now, he's going to buy the model. Okay, then that's not bad to the bone, is it? I didn't hit the sound effect. Problem is, he's buying the model from his dad's shop. Jonathan owns the shop with the model, and he goes in and says, my friend Superboy made up for my allowance, Dad. I'll take that model right now. Bag it. And you end up where Jonathan rightly says he's rubbing it in. Now he should start getting worried here because he is doing awful things. Well, while Clark goes off to do his model, you end up, Jonathan's going through the inventory in the shop and finds a magic set and says, all right, I figured out how I can get back at Superboy. I'm going to invite guests to the house tonight. I'm going to do all this. And the weird thing is that when he goes home, he's there. He has a magic set in his hand. He's invited friends over for a big magic show. But yet to get to where he wants to go, somehow he has to sneak down through the basement, he says. He says, I'll sneak through the basement with this magic set so Clark doesn't suspect the plan. And I guess he thinks Clark's upstairs. Of course, he's in the basement. He's working on his Superboy robot. And so he ends up seeing his father and says, oh, I can guess what he's going to do. Now, with that, I know that Superboy, Clark, has powers. You know, he does. Is one of those seeing the future? Because how could you see your dad walking through the basement with a box, and then you would realize that that means that he is going to, with a magic trick, end up handcuffing Superboy Clark Kent to the stairway and then pretending to lose the key so that Superboy can't go up, because this is a night when Superboy is supposed to be signing autographs for kids, seemingly in an alleyway. I don't know what's going on. He's in an alleyway signing autographs, right? So with that, though, why do you need to do the handcuff thing? All you have to do is say, oh, by the way, Clark, we're having a get-together tonight, and you must be there. Clark could say, oh, my God, I'm supposed to sign autographs in that shady alleyway. And then you end up having Jonathan say, well, I guess you're not going to sign autographs in the shady alleyway. Instead, he's there. And this whole gathering is basically set up of, hey, guys, come on over to my house tonight. I'm working on a magic act, and I want you guys to be the first to see it. There's only one trick, and the trick is set up to fail because Jonathan is going to handcuff Clark to the stairs and then accidentally lose the key that is supposed to unlock him. Now, Superboy Clark Kent, he can't reveal that he can break out of these, or that will reveal he's Superboy, so he's going to be stuck and can't go to the shady alleyway. Well, with that, you have all of these people gathered. What are they thinking then? He showed us one trick and it failed. This is bullcrap. They're just going to leave, and then Superboy will break out of the cuffs. But you don't have that. You end up, oh my God, I did it. You end up, Jonathan in his head is so happy. He's like, I got him. He won't be able to get away to sign those autographs. This is his punishment. Ha, ha, ha. And you end up going off into, you see that Superboy's off in the alley signing autographs. Then he flies back home into the Kent residence where Clark Kent is still, locked up to the stairway. And you end up having Superboy say, oh, you didn't realize that was a Clark Kent robot. Got you again, Dad. You're never going to get me. And he ends up saying, like, I made it so that you would be. And so Jonathan says, I give up. I give up. I can't do it. So then it says, but after, as Clark heard angry voices below his room. So Clark's like, no fuss, no muss. I mean, I'm the best. And goes up, starts reading, and hears voices below. And it's this. I can't handle Clark, and it's all your fault, Martha. You spoiled him. And then Martha, don't shift the blame on me, Jonathan Kent. He's your son, too. And then Superboy's, oh, my gosh, Mom and Dad are quarreling over me? He goes downstairs, and they are packing their bags. And it's such a cool little twist of the classic trope of, say, a lot of family sitcoms where the youngest kid, I'm going to run away. Okay, well, let me help you pack your bags. Let's go. Well, don't you love me? I'll come in. Make it so that they think they aren't running away themselves. Well, with this, it's It's them packing their bags. You end up having Jonathan say, "Bah, I'm moving out of here. I'm leaving that super brat in your hands, Martha. You can raise him from now on. I don't want any part of that imp of a son." And then Martha, she's got her bags packed. She's going the opposite way. I was hoping they'd put the chalk line down the middle of the room, a la I Love Lucy, but I'm going to my sister's. I'll never come back as long as Clark lives here. So they're basically both leaving Clark. They're both like, they're not necessarily upset at themselves or each other as much as they just hate Clark. We're leaving. Sayonara, sucker, we're out. They both slam opposite doors. They're out, and you end up having Clark, Mom, Dad, wait. Gosh, they both left out front the back door, and I'm all alone. Oh, my God. Then he goes over to a picture. I love them more than anything in the world, but now our happy home is broken up, and it's all my fault for being a bad boy. And then he keeps sobbing. He's crying. And I made a fool of Dad when he tried to punish me. Oh, if only they would come back. I would never be a bad boy again. And then they come in. Ha, we fooled you. And he's like, he says, right, I've lost my loving foster parents. And then they come in. And they're like, Mom, Dad, you're back. And the funny thing is, Jonathan Kent has to show that he never had anything in his suitcase. And he's like, we never really left you. We were only waiting outside. You see, your mother and I planned that fake quarrel/divorce to bring you to your senses. It was the only way we could punish our super son. And then you have Martha, you sure did. Oh, it's Superboy. You sure did. You found my one vulnerable spot. My love for both of you. Making me think I had lost you was a punishment after all. I've learned my lesson. And then you end up having Jonathan, I'm glad, son. We did it for your own good. Now, with that, I wish that they never revealed that it was a joke. And that's why Superboy has just been in line this whole time. And it's really screwing with him. But yeah, and again, this is why when Clark finds out that John ends up being with Ultraman in a volcano, he's like, yeah, we all had our problems in our past. And you end up where Clark goes out to chop some wood. And he says, I'll chop the wood the hard way, Dad. I realize now that all boys, including Superboy, needs guidance, firm guidance of their parents to learn right from wrong. And again, later you'll twist this all into the loving part of teaching lessons and trying to help Clark fit in. But at this point, this is just straight up 1950s backhand you if you don't listen. And you better obey your parents and you're not to question it. This is why when we get in the 60s, shit went wacky. This sort of thing, where everybody was supposed to be this way. The minute that these kids end up getting out into the real world, holy moly, they go nuts. And it says, as the recollections end for Dad, Kent, and son, after returning from the father and son banquet, you end up having Clark really, proud. Hey, Dad got Father of the Year, and you're Mother of the Year, Mom. And then Martha says, well, you're Son of the Year, Clark. And that is the end. So after this, Clark ends up dying somehow on an OD at Woodstock later on in the 60s, but we will avoid that. That got retconned. But you end up having an issue where you get the idea that Otto Binder is there and like, what do parents, deal with kids? We have a Superboy, and you have some wacky situations that you're always going to have. This one actually, I think, really came from the idea of being a parent and having to watch your kids starting to get through that phase disobeying. But what would we do if you had superpowers? So I understand, and I think it's less fantastical than a lot of these Silver Age things are. It just gets wacky and really takes some odd turns, and you end up having Clark just being a real piece of crap. But it's because he's bad to the bone, pretty much. And so that is it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. And if you want to hear more of things like this and also other things, if you're not aware of the $10 and above levels, you end up getting me and Matt Razor's Best Worst podcast that comes out once a week. You get the Back Issues podcast that I do, the DC one with Mark Jager, also do the Marvel one with Stork, and some other things as well. You end up having my Detective Before Batman podcast on Slam Bradley, and that's as wacky as this. I mean, it's offensive, but it's pretty wacky. But thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will talk to you later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.